All right, Zinni, thank you for the updates to those stories this morning. Right now, we're going to welcome our next live guest. We've got Peter Rentschler, CEO of Metafora, with us. A back-to-back of Metafora this week because we had Shanna on yesterday talking about kind of how to kind of get data good. This time, we're talking about solving problems using tech. So, Peter, thank you for joining us this morning. Great to have you as always. And I feel like tech is everybody's like go-to solution, right? You're like, I got a problem, I got a technology that'll solve that.
Technology, yeah, just buy software and it'll fix all the problems.
Wrong.
Yeah, wrong. Exactly, wrong. I mean, and I think it's certainly good between the topics of data and technology. You're lucky that you had Shanna on yesterday to cover data because she knows that space a lot better than I do. But yeah, I mean, technology has been certainly a hot topic in the industry over the last 5 years, and I think we've really seen. We've seen exponential growth in the industry as a result, and now it's what everyone's talking about.
And Peter, as we take a step into, of course, our industry, what are some of the solutions that you've seen that have been solved with correctly introducing and implementing technology?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, the obvious one is automation. I mean, that's where everyone kind of focuses their energy, and it's really, you know, how can you leverage technology to automate highly manual non-value add workflows. So think, you know, Project 44 automating tracking. Instead of someone having to pick up a phone call, they can get, or pick up the phone and make a call, they can get automated tracking updates, or a load matching platform that sources capacity and automates the process of a carrier sales rep at a freight broker, you know, finding a carrier partner to move the load. You know, the automation is kind of the first one. You know, a couple of others that we see often are, you know, one of them is dealing with tribal knowledge. You know, this is especially in something like transportation and logistics, which is such a people-heavy business. It's very common to see there's so much tribal knowledge in the heads of your team members, and so you end up having, you know, there are like 5 people on the floor of a couple hundred that know how to properly price freight, for instance. So a pricing engine can aggregate all of the knowledge from your team and then create kind of recreate the mental algorithm that individuals use along with data to create kind of a data-driven output rate. And then, you know, the third problem that we see solved frequently with technology is aggregating data and data strategy, back to what Shannon talked about yesterday. I mean, take something that's currently managed in spreadsheets. You know, there are issues with versioning, and the data is not clean, and you can't actually run analytics on the data. And so moving to a technology solution allows you to aggregate that data and then start making decisions based on the data that you have.
Just like we talk about how integrating kind of solutions is different for your business, finding the right piece of tech for your business is kind of, it's almost a Goldilocks approach, right? You've got to try one on for size, this one's too big, try one for size, this one doesn't do enough. And it can be kind of costly and time consuming. So when you're a company looking to now implement these data strategies, obviously working with a consulting firm like Metafora is that first step to take. But then how do you guys, what type of markers do you look to use to figure out like, this solution could be the perfect fit for you?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, you know, as much as we love the technology vendors in the space, I do think that there's sometimes a habit of showing the flashy features as opposed to really talking about what's the functionality that your business needs. And so I think, you know, from our perspective, kind of the first step to driving change with technology is determining your business strategy and vision and where do you want to be 5-10 years from now. If it's a family-owned business and you're planning on building a legacy business that your children will run, like that impacts the technology decisions versus if you want to build a business to a couple $100 million and then sell it to private equity or a strategic buyer, it probably doesn't make sense to invest in building your own software. And you may even want to choose software off the shelf that's a little bit more ubiquitous and widely adopted. but ultimately, once you have the business strategy and vision, I mean, it really comes down to identifying where there are gaps and inefficiencies in the workflow for your business, and then looking for software that solves those problems. And I think it's really important that when you're going through the demo process, you provide the buyer of the technology should provide the use cases and ask to see those workflows in a production environment from the technology platform. We've had issues where clients are demoed technology that's still in development, and it turns out that it's actually it's months or even years away from being deployed and really solving their problem.
Peter, that last point definitely holds true for me as watching and sitting on many demo calls, so I'm very familiar with that one. Peter, any insights on how to really kind of maintain training and that knowledge base despite implementing new technology? So when I'm thinking sometimes technology and software fails us, and I know from my personal example, if my microwave went out tonight, I would be out of luck for a while, and I probably would be struggling to find myself something to eat or how to make any kind of food. But when we're looking at technology failing, do you still see that need for people being able to understand how to do things the old-fashioned way of like, all right, this program isn't working right now, their service team is working on it, but we can still do things the old-fashioned way instead of just being out of luck for the entire day?
Boil your water on the stove, Anthony.
I don't know how.
You gotta boil your water.
Yeah. I don't know how the stove works. It's scary.
I just, Kaylee, your face when Anthony said that if his microwave went out, he's not sure he'd be able to feed himself. That's hilarious. Anthony, maybe next time I'm in Chattanooga, we can do a couple basic cooking classes together, because I love cooking.
There's also Uber Eats.
And there are a few things, and to your point, it's important to have a contingency plan. I mean, I love that you talked about training, because I do just want to quickly say that one of the biggest issues that we see in terms of new technology adoption is businesses not investing in properly training their team members and the associated change management. I mean, it's amazing how many companies we go into that are billion-dollar businesses that invested millions of dollars in Salesforce and tell us that Salesforce is a terrible CRM and they hate it and their team doesn't use it. And it turns out that they spent very little time configuring it to their sales process and literally did no training for their team on how to use it. They basically sent out a PDF on how to use it. So I do just want to really highlight the importance of training. Anthony, your question around contingency plans, it's an interesting consideration. I mean, especially, in 2022, I mean, shoot, in the last couple of years, we've had, there have been major cybersecurity attacks that have locked businesses out of their systems for days on end. We've had, I mean, every major cloud technology provider, whether it's Google Cloud, Amazon, or Microsoft Azure, have all had outages, significant outages at one point or another. And then you have like what happened with Omnitrax and their ELD outage. What was that, a year ago or so? Anyway, the point is that it's definitely worth having a contingency plan. That being said, we like to think about building for resiliency, and what that means is there are backups of the applications. And if you're running a cloud-based application, there should be multi-regional kind of backups and clouds available, where instead of having the entire application hosted on the western half of the country, you should have a backup of it running in parallel on the eastern half of the country to flip to. So I think that there's, Anthony, to answer your question, I think that there's a mix of kind of resiliency and contingency planning from a technical perspective that can mitigate the majority of those outages. And then, of course, it's always worth having a contingency, kind of a manual contingency process for, what happens if the system goes out for half a day, 2 days, so on and so forth.
I think that's an excellent point and a lot of great insights here this morning. As always, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Love seeing y'all. It's the best way to start a Friday morning.
Best way to, yeah, exactly. Now we're just going to roll into the weekend. Of course, we'll check in with you again shortly. Right now, we're going to toss it over back to the wall because we have Kaylee Nix back with another weather update.